Welcome to a BW Wellbeing World Dialogue. In a world that's fast changing, in a world that is full of stress, you need voices that give you direction, that give you tools to be able to take on the world and live a more peaceful and meaningful life. Today we are talking to a guru, a guide, an oracle, a monk who's really helping millions of people live a better life, whether by improving their thoughts or having better nutrition or embracing sustainable practices. Let me welcome His Grace Shri Gauranga Das ji to this BW Wellbeing World Dialogue. He's a prolific writer. He's a BTech in engineering, and he's also written 3 books. He's now writing another book on nutrition. Let me start by asking him, what makes you tick? What makes you do what you do? Why do you do what you do?
I think the most important requirement in life is purity in intention. And I actually decided 30 years ago that I would like to do selfless service for others. And when there is purity of intention, then you need to have enthusiastic inspiration. With both intention and inspiration, then you can actually have the right kind of intelligence to make the right choices. Then when you make the right choices, then you can actually have the right intensity to make things happen. So these are my thoughts on everything has to begin with the right intention.
Absolutely. I think for me also, when I interact with people, intent matters, Action matters, but intent matters a lot. And you talk of these 3 I's: intent, intensity, and inspiration. I would add insights that you provide to that as an additional I. But let me move on. When you see the world, there's a lot of strife. There's strife within, there's strife in families, there's strife in nations. Why is there so much strife and conflict in the world today?
In the Gita, which was spoken on a battlefield when 640 million soldiers were all prepared for a professional strife, as they say, ready for a war, Krishna spoke the Gita to Arjuna, and he prepared him for that battle. In fact, Arjuna was saying that I want to live a life without any strife, without any war. Krishna said, no, you have to fight this war. Because the nature of this world is there will be constant conflict. That's how this world is created. And so within a certain design, when something is already embedded, then you don't complain about it, but you deal with it. So the 3 main conflict pain points, which is part of the design of this world, which is systemic, it's called Adi Daivik, Adi Bhautik, and Adhyatmik Klesha. Klesha means some kind of misery. Adi Daivik is miseries caused by the universe, floods, famines, various kinds of cataclysms, tsunamis, nature, whatever. Adi Bhautik is miseries caused by other living entities, like the whole world experience that the world can be stopped just by a COVID virus which is less than 1 gram in total weight. So various kinds of diseases and difficulties and the kind of conflicts which other people cause upon us, this is all as part of Adi Bhautik Klesh. Third is Adhyatmik, where a person has difficulty and challenge dealing with his own mind, his own thoughts. And so we find that 300 million people across the world are experiencing stress symptoms, and 370 people in India are committing suicide every single day, which is a testimony that it is a strife, it is a conflict from within. So therefore, Krishna in the Gita is very clear that the difference between someone who is balanced or a subject expert and someone who gets bewildered and comes to the subject expert is how much the person understands the subject. So therefore Krishna through the Gita has given us the knowledge which will make you expert in how the soul interacts with two things, the world and the controller of the world. So therefore these are the three main important elements which the Gita speaks about: Ishwar, Jeev and Prakriti. And then what acts on the Prakriti is Kala, which is time, and Karma, which is action. So if anybody wants to understand what is Gita 101, it is Ishwar, Jeev, Prakriti, Kala, Karma, the soul who is trapped in nature, which is under the influence of time and impels the soul to do various actions. But beyond all these four, there is a supreme controller, and different theological traditions call that by different names and things like that.
So clearly, wisdom and counseling and inputs are needed to help people deal with their internal conflicts, so to say. How do you define the state of well-being for an individual? How does one achieve that?
Yeah. So, Annurag ji, I would like to share that there are two approaches. One is symptomatic approach and the other is pathological root cause approach. So when someone comes to a monk who is studying the ancient wisdom and tradition, and believe me, thousands of years have passed, times have changed, but you still find that one of the greatest pull people have is towards these ancient traditions, ancient wisdom, towards many of these philosophical thoughts. Why? If something is not effective, it will not have a market. You're a businessman, that the 2 billion population of this world is the one with disposable income, and when they are doing their business, they are looking at markets, they are looking at staying relevant, and to stay relevant you have to be innovative. As a business leader, one of the biggest contributions you bring to the table is the innovation, the innovative thoughts, the new ideas, because without that innovation you cannot stay relevant. If you don't stay relevant, you can't make money. But it's only the 2 billion in the world which has that disposable income, but the 6 billion of the world is actually the poor, below poverty line, poverty stricken, and therefore innovation becomes a core need for this 2 billion of this world. Now when you look at the spiritual and the philosophical people, what we are bringing to the table is helping both categories, the one with disposable income and the one who is underprivileged, both understand that beyond economics, beyond day-to-day making ends meet, there are certain core issues which all of us are dealing with, and those core issues have to be addressed, and therefore those core issues are described by Krishna in the Gita as those which are affecting the deepest heart, the viruses infecting the heart. Because as soon as a virus infects the hard disk of a computer, the computer crashes. The body may look very attractive, but within the body is the mind, which is the hard disk. If you have a computer whose screen looks brilliant, but the hard disk has virus, it will still be hang. So therefore, we are currently faced with a society which is moving around focused on making the external look more pleasant, more brilliant, more bright, put on a show of being cheerful, but we work on the hard disk of the mind. And Krishna identifies three main culprits. Trividham narakasyedam dwaram nashanam atmana kamam krodham tatha lobham tasmat etat trayam teje. The core, out of the 6 core viruses, 3 are more prominent: lust, anger and greed. Beyond that is envy, pride and illusion. This six is known as Shad Ripu, or the six enemies: Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moh, Mad, Matsar. And in all the traditions across, the idea is to treat all kinds of spiritual places and religious places of worship as hospitals for treating the mind which is infected. And if you look in the history of all the wars, all the battles, millions of people who have lost their lives in the First World War, Second World War, under the various different dictators or whatever, you will see and identify, even, and that continues even till today, which is wars which are absolutely appearing to be illogical,
ego driven,
but it is all coming from here: Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moh, Mad, Matsar. So therefore, Anurag, I think this initiative of yours of having a separate dedicated education to people for well-being is the need of the hour, because unless there is an internal transformation, just by creating policies, just by having various narratives, things are not going to change, because the human being has to change and transform from within.
Let me ask you, how does one deal with anger? How does one, sometimes when one feels irritated or one feels frustrated because you said something to multiple times and having no impact, how does one deal with it?
See, again, let me give the example of a patient in a hospital. If someone has TB, which is a very serious disease, so a TB patient may be given, some kind of a small pill or whatever as per what the person feels. But there is a process, there is a scientific process, there is a proper medical treatment for that TB, and that TB is not going to go away unless you go through that extended 7, 8, 9 months taking that treatment. Similarly, when people look at anger, those who are not aware of how to deal with it, they may give certain symptomatic solutions, that close your eyes, take a deep breath, do this, do that. These are all various suggestions which may be helpful, but the good news is that there is a deeper intervention possible on uprooting anger totally. And therefore, in the Gita, Arjuna asked the question to Krishna: Athakena prayuktoyam papam charati purusha anichannapi varshneya baladiva niyojita. Krishna, why does it happen that even intelligent people, sane people, in certain circumstances and situations seem to, as they say, lose it, and they are tempted, and they engage in activities which they also know is stupid, but later they regret, how did we do this? Why does such a thing happen with even intelligent people? And Krishna says very beautifully, Kama esha, Krodha esha, Rajoguna samudbhava, Mahashano mahapapma vidyenam iha vairinam. He says, Arjuna, things begin from ego, the desire to enjoy kama. So kama is known as lust, and the younger brother of lust is known as kamanuja. Kamanuja means younger brother of lust, who is always accompanying lust. Unfulfilled lust leads to anger. When the desire is unfulfilled, it leads to anger, and anger is one letter short of danger.
Absolutely. I personally always regret getting angry, if not 100 out of 100 times 99. But sometimes, if I may ask, it is a desire for perfection. It is a desire for excellence, if I may use. And if that is not happening, that creates anger. Of course, it's a desire. I agree with you. But how do you? And I know in my own case I have brought it down to a huge level, but sometimes I still get upset. And I want to. The reason I'm asking you this question is, it may help me and it may help everyone watching.
Definitely.
This. How do you make sure that you become calmer.
So nowadays everybody is looking forward, as you part of well-being is the topic of your channel and your this particular section of your media. Very important aspect of well-being as defined by WHO is the perfect well-being is defined as a synergy between body, mind and spirit. So for bodily well-being, people go to the gym, they do a workout, they work on the diet or whatever, but then people don't realize that well-being is not just only running on the treadmill. Just like you run on the treadmill to take care of your body, there is also a treadmill for the mind. So the treadmill for the mind and the workout for the mind is what is known as Chintan. Okay, so again, contemplation, meditation, which is giving quality time to slow down the mind. You lose weight of the body by increasing the speed of your body while jogging, but you lose weight of the mind by slowing down the mind
and reflecting upon what you did right, what you did wrong,
Correct.
What triggers you.
Exactly.
And that's why I now get it. You said it recently that make a a registrar of your mistakes. Write them down and keep a list.
Correct.
So that you can reflect and learn from it and not repeat. Possibly.
Absolutely.
Is that what the intent of writing down your mistakes?
See, whatever you do seriously, what is the proof of that you are doing it seriously? You keep an account. Keeping an account, tracking, accountability is a symptom of doing something seriously. And I don't have to tell you, because you are doing business very seriously from so many decades. So you have been keeping track of things of your particular business interest. So that is what we call as professional. And then we differentiate professional from leisure. Because what you do leisure, you don't keep such a track.
Sure.
Like that. So that's the difference.
So let me also ask you, now in one of your books, early books, you talk about rejection.
Mm-hmm.
And rejection hurts, whether it's in any sphere of life. Somebody's
Right.
gone for an interview, somebody wanted, it was two CEOs, one got promoted to CEO, the other didn't, happened with a close friend, he resigned. Rejection happens in personal life, in personal relationships.
Right.
How does one deal with rejection?
First of all, we should know that I am not in control. At the most philosophical level, we should remember that I am not in control. If you look at the typical example of the battlefield of Kurukshetra, it's very interesting. Arjuna, what is his background? Always been successful, never lost a battle in life. Gold medalist from Dronacharya's Institute of Archery, Krishna's closest friend. He had the 5-star and platinum in everything. Nobody would imagine that there could be a reason for Arjuna to ever feel confused. Because when you have everything going the way you want, including having Miss Universe as his wife, Draupadi, what else you need? But the battlefield of Kurukshetra is orchestrated to demonstrate any of us can go through sudden change in life, and that sudden change will become difficult for us to accommodate. And that's what happened when Krishna brought Arjuna's chariot in front of Bhishma and Drona, and suddenly there was a change in paradigm. Arjuna thought of Duryodhana, yes, my relation is clear, I have to kill him. But Bhishma, he is my grandfather, I have to love him. Drona is my teacher, I must respect him. At that one moment, Arjuna went through a severe identity crisis between a warrior, a student and a grandson. And this, I see, Annurag, is a major challenge that people identify themselves with certain positions which is beyond their control to manage. So Arjuna's Swadharma was a warrior, Arjuna's Swabhava was that of a warrior, but knowing both the Swadharma and Swabhava going his way, circumstances would change and they would constantly change. So Krishna reveals to Arjuna a third layer of deeper identity which will never change, and tells Arjuna to anchor himself at that level of identity, and that is known as Swarupa, as an Atma. And that Atma is not to be remembered only in obituary columns after people depart, but it is something for us to reflect on and connect with.
Absolutely. So you are saying to deal with rejection, you have to accept as it is and reflect on it, and then again accept it, because leave it to the divine, and Now let me ask you. Today, leadership is making a difference in every, whether it's leadership of countries, leadership of companies, of communities. What is your commentary on the quality of leadership overall?
Very important point. I would define the quality of leadership in terms of 4 motivations. At the lowest level, and that again because I'm a student of the Gita, and because Prime Minister Modi has been giving the Gita to so many influential leaders across the world, including Prime Ministers and President, and I had the good fortune of studying the Gita for 30 years, which is one of the greatest, I would say, lessons on leadership spoken by Krishna to Arjuna. So Gita speaks of leadership at 4 levels. The lowest is leadership influenced by the intention of mode of ignorance, tamogun. In tamogun, the intention to lead and work is based on fear. I have to do this, otherwise I lose this. I have to do this, otherwise someone else gets it. I have to do this because, it is all fear driven. And we have seen many leaders who have taken decisions for themselves, their organizations, their nations, based on fear. Tamogun. And the effect of tamogun is, it creates lethargy, it creates destruction, it is ghastly, it harms both the person taking the decision and the person on whom the decision is implemented. Harm at all sides. 360-degree harm. That is tamogun. Above fear is rajogun, and it is intention inspired by desire. Oh, I have to grow bigger, I have to grow this, I have to outdo, compete, and show to the world that I am better than so and so. So it is just that motivation of desire is coming from the mode of passion, and that keeps a person constantly in anxiety. Above that is the mode of goodness, sattvagun, and that is what Krishna wants Arjuna to begin acting at that level. It is the intention of duty, kartavya bhav, and therefore majority of the Hindus know this verse from the Gita, karmanyeva adhikaraste ma phaleshu kalachana. That means, Arjuna, when you are duty driven, you will do irrespective of what. So then above that is the mode of pure goodness, which is inspired by love, where you are only concerned with the object you are serving and willing to go through all pain to give pleasure to others. That is the highest level of servant leadership.
Absolutely. Now let me ask you, since you mentioned about it, that you're writing a book on nutrition and how nutrition plays a role in a country's destiny, in an individual's journey to well-being. Give us a sense of what is good nutrition and what is bad nutrition.
Yeah. So, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains that food in the mode of goodness, it increase one's longevity, it increase one's potency, one's overall health, and most importantly, it increases one's feeling of peace and serenity in the mind. So when people ask, what should I do in life in terms of my diet? Should I be vegetarian, non-vegetarian, this, that? So I say, that's not the main question. The main question should be, what is your objective? A wrestler's and boxer's diet will be different from a gymnast's diet. So you can't have a gymnast's diet being given to a boxer and a boxer's diet being given to a gymnast. So the trainer for each one will first see the objective, and based on the objective the diet is defined. Similarly, if someone says, my objective is to be peaceful and calm, serene, have clarity of thought, purity of thought, and parity of thought, then one needs to come to the mode of goodness, sattva gun. If you want to come to the mode of goodness, if that is the objective, then you have to eat items in the mode of goodness. If your objective is to be passionate and to be this and that, then mode of passion. So everything is defined very scientifically accordingly. So therefore, currently globally, if you look at all the nutrition experts also, they are able to see a close correlationship between the top 3 diseases led by cancer and heart ailments, which is moving like a epidemic, and a close relationship of that with the diet. And therefore, at the Govardhan Eco Village, we have created a model of working with 10,000 farmers, helping them grow millets and various kinds of indigenous seeds based rices, even including there is a variety known as Mahadi rice, which is, you will not even find it in the market. But you won't believe it that by eating this Mahadi rice, it has such good quantity of calcium that microfractures can be cured. So India used to have thousands of varieties of rice before, but right now we are left with only a few hundreds of varieties. So therefore, I think I really appreciate that this year is being celebrated as the International Year of the Millets, and the world needs to know that millets and foods which have a low glycemic index need to be really promoted a lot, because India is very soon become the diabetes capital of the whole world, and we need to look at the various paradigms which are available so that we can create a longer life, healthier life, and a calmer life for people.
Yeah, but let me also take it to another level. You keep going back to the Gita, which is a great toolkit for living a good life. There is the Upanishads, there is the Vedas.
Correct.
But our role models are not necessarily, if people come to you for wisdom, they come to you for guidance, but sometimes they are the wrong role models. What is the role of media in being able to bring the right role models to the fore and right practices? Because there is nudity being shown, there is consumption of alcohol, there is pornography, and more importantly, there is violence. So what do you think media can do to be able to change its focus?
Right.
Even in news channels, there's so much high decibel cacophony rather than a samvad, rather than a conversation. So
Right.
what do you think media should do to fulfill its dharma?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. First of all, the media has to realize the strength in Bharatiyata, in its Indian traditions and roots. Annurag ji, you know that from 1 AD to 1000 AD, India was sharing 36% of the global GDP. We were not aping anybody from any part of the world. Then by 1500 it came down to 27% as some foreign influence began. When the British increased their attacks, by 1800 it came down to 16%. But 1800 to 1900 was the real attack, because of which then the GDP contribution of India came down to only 1%. But the interesting thing is, for 1700 years, India was leading the world's economy while maintaining the social harmony. So we did not have to do all kinds of crazy things to attract people's attention, and some of the biggest travelers, thinkers and writers were coming to India to learn, and their writings are still available. So I think you have brought in a very important topic, that today it appears that unless you bombard the ether with Rajogun and Tamogun, the mode of passion and mode of ignorance, you will not be able to attract people's attentions and get the eyeballs. But the interesting thing is, Annurag ji, you know as a media expert, during the COVID, which were the two serials which got the highest TRP, so to say, as soon as the COVID began, it was Ramayana and Mahabharata. The kind of unprecedented attraction those narratives had. So therefore, yes, there is a place for conflict, there is a place for romance and love, there is a place for family drama and politics, but all of that can be demonstrated and shared in palatable ways. And what is important is the right messaging, because it's a fact that even the entire way Srimad Bhagavatam and Ramayana and Mahabharata is portrayed, it is not just a conversation of sages all through, because it's a fact that in this world, to attract attention, that which attracts attention the most is love and hate. And therefore, unless you have some kind of a plot moving between these two, you cannot attract people's attention. And even spiritual people through Mahabharata and Ramayana are only sharing the legacies of love and hate, love and conflict. But the methodology by which this should be demonstrated and portrayed is important. Somehow I feel, by comparing with so many other countries in the world which also do politics and all, India seems to be more obsessed with drama all through the year, rather than doing focused quality work to transform the society. So I think
Keep impactful work which will show up by itself.
Somehow we have lost the culture of doing things with excellence. We have to make excellence a habit. That used to be part of our DNA before, but somehow right now the focus seems to be, we need to show more than actually do. And the discourse all through the year is, which is the next election coming, who is going to be winning, who is going to be losing. But after someone has won, what is the accountability of what they are doing? What are some of the good works they have done? So the media can play a major role in actually sharing such stories
Of
excellence.
And also making leaders accountable for what they promise. Now let me come to another aspect that I keep deeply thinking about, is this aspect of forgiving. It's very difficult to forgive, especially if you feel somebody's wronged you in a very deep way. But it's not impossible. And as they say, when you forgive someone, you actually forgive yourself from a burden of carrying that angst. Or is there a toolkit for achieving peace and forgiving?
I'll share a small story to demonstrate that both forgiveness and lack of forgiveness has its place in life. We were looking for a security dog, and someone who was an expert, he came up and there were 2-3 puppies, and then he picked up that puppy in a certain way and picked up another puppy just little bit, and that puppy made a very growling sound and reacted the sharpest. So he said, this puppy will be the best for a guard dog. I said, why? Because for a guard dog, lack of tolerance is an ornament. Because if there is a guard dog and there is some disturbance and the guard dog is peaceful, it will not perform. So therefore, for someone who is playing the role of a Kshatriya, that person's blood must boil when seeing injustice. Then only they can react, and then only they can protect. And therefore, I would say that if you have forgiveness, yes, it is important, but time, place, circumstance. Lack of forgiveness and tendency to retaliate, that also has its place as per time, place and circumstance. So we are living in a very dynamic, diverse world, and what is required is the clarity of thought and the maturity to apply these different things as per the situation.
Absolutely. You bring me to a very important point, which is balance. See, again, we live a life where without passion you cannot achieve what you want to. But you really get the life when you're a little dispassionate. You make that distinction as you keep talking about.
Right.
How does one be balanced in their approaches at work, in family, in societal roles that one plays?
Right. If one sees the mood of guardianship and trusteeship, then they get the level of maturity by which they know that, I am not doing these things just for myself, but there are other stakeholders also. So we call it the S3 impact. S for spirituality, which means harmony with the self, harmony with the divine. The second is sustainability, which is harmony with nature. And the third is social inclusion or social impact, which is harmony with the community. So therefore, our ancient tradition and all traditions, whether it is Hinduism, Christianity, Islam, Sikhism, Jainism, whatever. So today the world is 31% Christians, 23% Muslim, 15% Hindus, 8.5% Buddha. All the traditions, they are actually teaching harmony. But ironically, those who seem to be professing that harmony and practicing the harmony, many times they get into conflict, and people's image about all philosophy and religion today is a topic which creates a lot of conflict, whereas originally it is supposed to be creating harmony. So I just give the example that when you are having a disease, someone may go for allopathy, someone may go for homeopathy, someone may go naturopathy, and then I say if nothing works, then some go for Tirupati for darshan when nothing works. But whatever it is, we don't see homeopathy guy fighting out with the allopathy and Ayurveda guy and this and that in such ways as many times in spiritual domains we see that happening. So therefore, I think it's important for people to understand the core essence that all of these practices are to enable people to experience deeper harmony with themselves.
His Grace Gauranga Das ji, you talked about sustainability a lot in your discourses and in your area of influence and work. You brought about sustainability consciousness to the fore.
Right.
Tell us why sustainability is so important and what can each one of us do to contribute to a sustainable planet.
Right. So just I'll give you an example of Delhi NCR, since we are having this podcast here. Just a few years ago, the annual consumption of petrol and diesel, with all the vehicles put together, was almost, 2 billion liters. Now, for burning this amount of petrol and diesel, you almost need 12 times the oxygen. And for releasing that kind of oxygen, you need a forest which will have at least 60 crore trees, for which Delhi NCR's size should be at least 27,000 square kilometer, whereas it's only 47 square kilometers. So, you can realize that it is very, very difficult for us to change this planet unless we self-discipline ourselves. If the paradigm of success and progress is more consumption, more cars, more fashion and more use and throw, then the human society is trapped in certain misconceptions, which is money can bring happiness, consumption can bring satisfaction, weapons can bring security, and the planet is an unlimited sink which can absorb as much of waste as we put. So you will be shocked to know that the whole world is at the brink of a collapse, and therefore only 2.5% of the world's water is actually not potable water, it is sweet water. But out of that 2.5%, 99.7% of that sweet water is in glaciers, is underground water, and it is in atmosphere water. So what you see in lakes and rivers is only 0.3% of that 2.5%. But when we look at water around and available for drinking, we just take it for granted. So therefore, sustainability is a very, very crucial element. It begins with self-control and self-discipline, and you'll be surprised to know, Annurag ji, that United Nations, which is a science and data-backed organization, in 2017 came to the conclusion that unless spiritual and religious organizations come forward and share messages on self-discipline with people and their congregations and their followers, we will not be able to arrest the climate change or mitigate the climate change. So they created a new vertical called UN Faith for Earth. And this is the first time in history where a science and data backed organization acknowledging, accepting and inviting spiritual organizations to work hand in hand and supporting and collaborating with a completely science and data backed organization like UN. And 2020, amongst 100 world leaders, I have also been appointed as a UN Faith for Earth counselor. And the Govardhan Eco Village is accredited to the United Nations Environment Program and United Nations Economic and Social Council. United Nations Biodiversity Council, I was just part of the COP16 summit in Montreal. And a whole world declaration has been signed to preserve and protect biodiversity. So biodiversity loss, climate change mitigation and pollution caused by industrial effluents. These are the three biggest priorities which UN has taken. And therefore, if you don't have a house to live in and if the house is on fire, the first priority would be to make sure that every member, irrespective of their differences, come together to set out that fire.
Let me ask you my last two questions. My first question is, we are so busy, all of us, including me. How do we make the time to reflect? And again, you may say that if you don't, then being busy is unproductive, so to say.
No.
This obsession with productiveness, whereas, all the religious texts say just be, don't be ambitious.
Right.
But we put goals, we have a GPS, we have trackers. Why is this obsession with measuring goals, productivity? How does, again, I'm not saying that if you're a corporate leader, you'll have a goal. But how do you kind of balance all this?
Again, as I always refer back to the Gita, I will explain the paradigm which the world is currently caught in by showcasing the 5 topics of Gita, where the jiva or the soul is caught in the middle. The jiva, when he tries to exploit and enjoy prakriti or nature, and under the influence of time, kala, he engages in karma or action. So a busy human being basically is a jiva trying to engage in karma under the influence of time while trying to enjoy, exploit and control Prakriti. This whole paradigm of trying to enjoy and be the proprietor, it creates the experience of chinta. Chinta means anxiety. Why? Because the soul is not the original controller. He is trying to control. But then when due to the chinta the soul starts thinking, is there another controller beyond me? And he looks up. Then he looks at Ishvara. So therefore Gita is bringing into the picture that yes, we are not against your karma or action. We are not against your being accomplishment and achievement driven. Arjuna was one of the most accomplished and achieved person. We are not against your trying to enjoy, right? But you know as a business person that if there are businesses and if there are various ways, but there are also regulatory bodies. Why do you need regulatory bodies if business was everything? Because unless there are regulatory, unless there is RBI, unless there is SEBI, unless all these regulatory bodies are there is no one to see whether someone is crossing the boundaries or not. So therefore, the spiritual traditions are not anti-profit. They are not anti-achievement or they are not anti-accomplishment. They are not anti-busy. They are anti-crossing the limits and crossing the boundaries. So when you accept Ishwar and begin the day by spending some quality time reflecting on the reality that okay, there is an Ishwar, I am a Jiva, rather than being the enjoyer and proprietor of Prakriti through Kala and Karma, let me be the trustee. And in that trusteeship, the Chinta turns into Chintan. So when you say Chintan, it means what?
Reflection.
Reflection on the fact that who are the major stakeholders in this enterprise and what is my role in that entire equation. To remember that every day is important, because you know you have spent enough time in this corporate world to know that sometimes certain people go off the radar because they forget that they have been put in that position on behalf of the shareholders and the board of directors, and they are supposed to be acting
as guardians. Now, my last question to you, and then I'll do a rapid fire, is we all are chasing happiness. And sometimes it manifests in listening your favorite song, is meeting somebody who inspires you, reading a good book, maybe eating that favorite thing your mother makes. But happiness is more elusive than that. We get ephemeral happiness, if I might say. How to be in a constant state of happiness? Or if I may say bliss.
Right.
Is it possible to be in a state of bliss?
Yeah, great question, Annurag ji. If you go to a restaurant, ice creams come in multiple flavors. If you go to an automobile market, then the cars also come right from 10-15 lakhs to whatever 5 crores or whatever. So for anything, any product in this world, there is a range. Pleasure also comes in that same category. There is 4 aane ka pleasure to karodon ka pleasure. So therefore Gita categorizes it. Lowest is sensual pleasure. Gulab jamun liya, khaya, the end. Above that is pleasure coming from the mind. You hear a song, write a poetry, what you experience, emotions, it's higher. Higher than that is intellectual. When the intelligence is absorbed in that. So therefore scientists who are trying to crack a problem, they forget sense of even eating and sleeping and things like that. Above the intellectual pleasure is egoistical pleasure, pleasure of the ego. And therefore you can see that even if a term sheet makes sense, people walk out because they are losing control. Above that, highest is the spiritual pleasure. So that's called Ramante Yogino Anante Satyananda Chidatmani Iti Rama Pade Naso Param Brahma Vidiyate. Ram is a very, very common and famous name in India. But what is the definition of the word Ram is this verse. Ramante Yogino Anante Satyananda, the true pleasure which is an ocean of bliss. The ocean never subsides. The ocean is always constant. So the constant, undecreasing pleasure is known as Rama. Iti Rama Padena, so Param Brahma Vidyate. So that is the spiritual pleasure, and therefore those who are yogis or spiritualists or those who are in this world but following some spirituality, they are actually connoisseurs of pleasure, because they are not settling for the cheaper version of pleasure, but they are actually wanting to go for the Rolls Royce of pleasure. That's why they are known as the yogis.
So I said last, let me ask you, because it made me think. We are driven by two things. One is vanity. My knowledge is more than yours. I know more people than you. I'm better than you, kind of a complex. And that's what drives people buying a bigger house, better valuation, all that. More followers on social media, whatever. And the other is guilt. I think vanity and guilt drive most of our behaviors. How do you deal with vanity and how do you deal with guilt?
I think the opposite of vanity is humility. So when you are just looking at yourself, you are always obsessed with how to grow myself more. But if you look at others, and so when Krishna looks at the trees in Vrindavan, he glorifies the trees. Krishna is the supreme, full of all opulences, but he has the humility to observe the glory of the trees, and you know what he says? Pashadetan Mahabhagan Parasaikanta Jivitan. Why the trees are glorious? We see trees every day, every moment. They are glorious because they are simply concerned with serving others. They go through pain themselves, give pleasure to others. Patra, Pushpa, Phala, Chaya, Moola, Valkala, Darubi, and he lists the various things the trees keep giving without giving anybody a bill. And he says, Etavat Janma Safalyam. This is the success in life. Leading a life which is based on serving others selflessly and based on humility, gratitude and forgiveness. So therefore, when we recognize ourselves as trustees and not as proprietors and enjoyers, then this can be automatically accomplished.
Beautiful. I've enjoyed this conversation, and I'm sure our viewers and readers would. I want to end by a quick rapid fire.
Sure.
The secret to success?
Service.
The secret to happiness?
Selflessness.
The secret to good intent?
Guidance.
The secret to selflessness?
Association.
And the secret to good health?
Discipline.
Thank you, His Grace Shri Gauranga Das for talking to us and giving our viewers such valuable inputs. And I think everyone will go richer in a metaphorical way. And if applied, I think a lot of it is about application, we know. But reinforcement from a guru, from an expert, from a practitioner always helps. Today, Gauranga Das has given us beautiful inputs on how to live a better life, how to live a more selfless life, how to embrace humility, and more importantly, truly have a well-being driven life. So I hope you take away the right lessons from it, you implement and you benefit and achieve a state of well-being. Thank you for watching this BW Wellbeing World Dialogue, and we'll be back soon again with a guru, with a personality, with a domain expert who you would love listening to. Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you.